Hi there everybody, grab the pen. How's it going? I'm speaking in Wellington this evening, so I just thought I'd do this now while I could, in case I can't get sorted this evening, and I want to carry on now that we're in the flow of it. So, what I want to start looking at from today, well, first of all, just an interesting thing. Many of you will know that I've often spoken publicly and blogged and written about my concerns over The Secret, the so-called The Secret. And it's interesting that today, all over the internet, that one of the Australian gurus has been exposed as a scammer and a liar, and it kind of ties in some ways to what we're talking about, really, is that often those people can become very narcissistic. They take something that in this case, the guy's making good money out of what he's doing. He could have been doing it honestly, but through self-deception and various other things that are going on because of what's happening inside of him, he ends up in a dishonest situation, in a place where he's damaging and wounding others. And so it's just interesting that I've maintained all along that The Secret just is not true, and it's interesting that it's now being exposed. Not necessarily a reflection on some of the people involved. Like all these things, it'll be full of good people, but these where people try and teach you something that is kind of a miraculous cure-all to every ill on the planet. That's not what life is like. So that's why I'm excited to be able to share some truth with you about what really helps. Okay, so I want to start talking about forgiving ourselves, and to do with that, we need to have a look at some issues for some of us first. I want us to understand a concept, and that is this, that to get back to the spirit, soul, body thing, we have a true self, in other words, who we really are. And as a Christian, I would talk about that as being who we were designed, to be and created to be. But irrespective of that, it's just there is the real Dean, the real Joe, the real Bob, the real Sue, the person who, if they weren't wounded or damaged, or if they were free to be themselves, then this is the person that they would be like. And that was God's intent. And the Bible talks about Adam and Eve. When God created them, they were in the Bible, they were completely naked, they were unashamed, they weren't aware of there being anything embarrassing about that. So they were able to be entirely transparent with each other, something that few of us would ever have experienced in our lives. So what's happened is that life, sin, all these things, we end up developing a false self. Some of us have several. And what this means is that we have masks that we put up, and we have ways of behaving to protect ourselves or whatever it might be. I've got a guy who I've had quite a lot to do with, who when he comes and talks to me, you'd swear he was a Christian, and then the next day he's going to a brothel and hanging out with those guys and behaving like one of them, and then the next day he's a big businessman and behaving like a big businessman, and his life has a different mask. Puts this mask on, puts that mask on, puts that mask on. And part of dealing with forgiving ourselves is to understand who we really are and having to come out from some of those masks. And it's not a simple process necessarily. Sorry, it's not that it's not simple, but it requires some real willingness on your part to have a look at what you're really like, and what are the ways in which you have modified your behaviour, and what are the things that you actually hide behind, because the truth or the reality of who you are is something that you don't want to confront. So this tends to fall, the false self tends to display itself in one of two ways. So what I thought I'd do today is talk about the perfectionistic side of that. You'll tend to become, if you take it to an extreme with the false self, you're going to be somewhere between a perfectionist or on the other end is, for want of a better term, the kind of slob end of it. Sorry, it's a slightly unkind word, but it's just the best thing I can think of. So I just want to, over the next couple of days, explain to you this. It's phase one of getting to where we're going to work on forgiving ourselves, to understand what is a false self and how does it manifest itself. So many of us, we set up a false self where we become very perfectionistic, and there are quite a few ways that manifests itself. One is that we become, the phrase that I like is the tyranny of the ought. I ought to do this, I ought to do that. And what we're doing is we're allowing ourselves to be controlled by a set of inner commands that we can actually never, it's like we've set up our own general inside of us that's barking orders at us, Sergeant Major, not General, Sergeant Major that's barking orders at us internally, and we're never at peace, we're never able to fulfill those things, we never get to the end of that, and we just always like feeling guilty when we relax, ever unable to kind of feel like there's not a whole lot of stuff that's undone and I have to get on and get it going. It's very, very common. Next thing is self-depreciation. Oh, that should be a did. Self-depreciation. Right, so we constantly belittle ourselves. Oh, I can't believe I did that wrong again. I can't believe I'm so stupid. I can't believe I'm such a terrible wife. I can't believe I'm so bad at this. I can't believe I forgot that. And we find 100 times a day, and so this is at the root of harbouring unforgiveness against ourselves. 100 times a day why something's not, I haven't got enough work done today. We write lists of stuff we have to do, and we go to Stephen Covey and other people and get the thing of how to do effective lists. But because we don't get 100 things finished when only 3 was reasonable, our day's ruined. We'll never, ever get to that place of just accepting the fact that we can't control everything and the world is not a perfect place. All right, so again, very, very common and rooted in a false self that is causing us to never be who we really are. Anxiety is the third one. Again, that's common in many aspects, but is pretty much just this feeling of guilt. So kind of ties into these two, right? But it's just a never-ending feeling of guilt or stress, and often without any reason why. And for many of you, if you're listening to this, it'll only be as I say this that you might actually stop and think, yeah, I feel like that all the time. I wonder how long I felt like that. Years. You know, and even when you lie in bed at night, you just know it's there. It could be quite a revelation for some of you to suddenly realise that that's there. It's a false self. It's not the real you trying to make you be or do something that you're not. Legalism. This is a biggie, and this is and it's interesting because this is very much related not just to life, but with life, but also very much in our investing. You see this, anybody who is legalistic will have a false self going on. Anybody who's absolutely dogmatic about something. Now, I don't mean having firmly held beliefs. There's nothing unhealthy about that. But what legalism will cause you to do is to effectively judge other people by a standard. For example, to use in Christian circles, let's say if you smoke, which is not a good thing, but if you smoke in certain Christian circles, you would be labelled as being an inferior Christian, whatever that is. I've been in property investing circles where people who have their mortgages on interest only instead of principal and interest are considered substandard investors. I've had doors closed to me for speaking in the past, not now, but in the past, because I was a property trader, and the old school property investors have said, we don't want property traders to be talking to us. You know, they're not real investors. So there's this legalistic thing that kicks in any area of life. But it's very, very powerful. And what it does is, as I said, it causes a distinction. Instead of us being able to accept others and to love others, and in the same way, therefore, love and accept ourselves, we have to have this standard here, and we're actually consciously looking for people who won't measure up to that, because that's our way of trying to feel better about ourselves. It's like, well, I don't smoke, therefore I don't drink, I don't sleep around, I don't have financial difficulties, you know, or whatever. I don't swear, whatever it might be. It's a legalistic, it's a false self. We're putting this mask on that says I'm okay because I don't, right? And the reality is that I'm not okay because I need the mask. You with me? All right. And I could go on, but I think you get the point. With people on this side of the ledger is perfectionists, very, very commonly angry. And related to this, I'll just put it here because we'll talk about it tomorrow, is narcissism. Narcissism? It might be spelt wrong, sorry if it is. I'll explain what that is tomorrow, but narcissists are very much like this. So anger is pretty self-explanatory. Now, the reason we get angry, though, this is interesting. You see, why are we angry? If we've got a false self that's causing us to be a perfectionist, we actually get angry because we're exhausted from trying to meet the demands of 1 to 4, and we can't. So we're actually angry with ourselves, but we never ever understand that. If you struggle with this, you will never make that connection. You'll never go, oh, I'm actually annoyed with myself. But like, I had a friend who I used to be involved with when we used to teach this, some of this material in a Christian setting, and he talked about a guy that he worked with, and he said this guy just went totally ballistic one day, and at my friend Mark. And Mark just looked at him and said, well, I don't know who you're angry with, but it can't possibly be me because I haven't done anything to you. And the guy just totally, like, you know, bursting a balloon. And he just walked off. Now, the reality is this guy, his life had this mask of anger. He was angry with himself. And I just know as I say this that for many of you this is true. You struggle in that area with controlling that anger, and as I've explained earlier, our emotions come out of our soul, but this form of anger is actually a bit more deep rooted. It's actually you hate yourself and you're sick of trying to keep up with yourself. You don't understand that. Some of you might be going, wow, that sounds like me, all right? But what I'm saying is that it's entirely and internally, it's an unforgiveness issue within ourselves. So if you're angry and you think, oh, you've tried counselling and you've gone to self-help and you've tried drugs and whatever it is, this is the secret. This is the real stuff that will, if you can reach that point where you can see, it's like, wow, okay, I'm trying to fulfill all these demands in my life that I'm self-imposing on myself that nobody else expects me to achieve. And I can't do it, and so I'm exhausted and I'm ropeable with myself. Right? You'll never solve it any other way. You can get as stoned and as brainwashed as you like unless you get to a place where you're able to forgive yourself and to stop putting crazy demands on yourself. That anger will never dissipate. All right, so I think that's enough for today. I strongly suspect I've given you some things to seriously think about. So this is one end of the false self, and very common, very, very common in our society. It's not real in the sense that it's not true. We're not meant to live like this. It's not God's plan for us. Okay, I'll always say that to you over and over again. So we'll look tomorrow at narcissism and some other outworkings of the false self, and I hope you're just taking some notes about the ways that you think this relates to you. The more you can understand this about yourself, you'll get to a place where you'll start to feel good about yourself. for the first time in your life for many of you, and that excites me much more than teaching you about how to make money in property. So thank you again for your time. God bless you. I'll see you tomorrow.